So this week you've been set something a little bit different to do, and rather than having a video lesson, I'm just going to have a bit of a video explanation of what you're doing, how to do it, and why you're doing it. So the Junior Maths Challenge, some of you might have done in Year 7, and it's a qualification which is not like a GCSE or anything. It's something completely extra. It's usually just for the more able mathematicians, which is why you as top set students are doing this now. And the reason you're doing it is because there is actually going to be an online version of this year. So we're going to have a little bit of a practice. And some people, I'm not sure who, will be having a go at this for real, but it's useful for everybody to have a go at because it really helps develop your problem solving skills. So this is a past paper from 2015. I'm just going to quickly talk about the rules. I'll gloss over some because they are not important to how we're doing it, but some I'll go into a bit more detail. So this, don't open the paper till individually it tells you to. Open it whenever you want. That's fine. Time allowed 1 hour. Again, you take as much or as little time as you need for this. Okay, so you're not limited to 1 hour. Is what I'm trying to say. I would rather you spend longer than 1 hour and have a go at all the questions than just limit yourself to 1 hour and not get through much work. You can use rough paper. You can't use calculators, and it says measuring instruments are forbidden. That means rulers, protractors, compasses, that sort of thing. You're not allowed to do things via scale drawings. That's not what they want you to do. So you've got to be year 8 or below to do it. It says use a HB or B pencil. That's not applicable here, so we're not doing the real paper. We're just doing it ourselves at home. It says don't expect to finish the whole paper in 1 hour. That's why I was stressing about the fact that you can spend more than 1 hour doing this. I'd rather you spend a couple of hours having a go at this if you need to, and getting more of it done. So there's the way the marks work is there's 5 marks awarded for questions 1 to 15. There's 6 marks awarded for 16 to 25. So 16 to 25 a little bit harder. Now, if you guess some question in 1 to 15 and you're wrong, it doesn't matter. But if you guess a question and you get it wrong in 16 to 25, then you lose some marks. So in 16 to 20, you lose 1 mark, and in 21 to 25, you lose 2 marks. So don't worry about this answer sheet thing because you're not going to be answering on an answer sheet. You're just going to be writing down sort of A, B, C, D, whatever the answers are. And it says here, this paper is to challenge you to think and not to guess. Now, if you're doing this for real, I would be telling you, don't leave anything in 1 to 15 blank. You should always guess, even if you don't know. You should try to think first, but there's no penalty for guessing wrong, so you should always have a guess. Okay, but it is a perfectly valid technique to leave questions 16 to 25, some of those blank if you don't know the answer, because otherwise you might lose marks. Right, let's look at some questions and talk about some different strategies for solving them. So some questions, like the first few, are quite easy, and you are expected to just work them out. Okay, there's no real trick to this. You just actually work it out. So you do 1, take away 2, then add 3, then add 4. Do all of these and see which one gives you the largest answer, and that's what option you put down. You put down A, B, C, D, or E. Okay, the same thing for the next one. You just work it out. It's just a time question, and you can work it out. Right, some questions, you can just eliminate certain possibilities straight away. I mean, this divided by this is certainly not 1. It's certainly not 8 either. And it's certainly not this one. It couldn't possibly be bigger when you're dividing it. So it's going to be one of these two. And then what you could do is you could do it in a couple of different ways. If you add up the bottom row, you get 9, 10, 15. So the question's asking you to do 12,345 divided by 15. So you could do that using long division. Or what you could do is you could multiply 678 by 15. See if you get this. If you do, great, it's that answer. If you don't, it must be this one. Okay, so there are other ways of doing it. So generally people find multiplication easy in division, so that's one way of doing it there. Number 4. So it's just a bit of logical thinking here. You got to figure out what's x, adding numbers up to the top of the pyramid. So if we're going down the pyramid with partial information, we're going to be subtracting. So just work out what you get in each position, and you will eventually get down to x. Question 5. If between a third of a certain number and a quarter of the same number is 3. So it's basically saying the difference between a third and a fourth of that number is 3. So if you work out what the difference between a third and a fourth is, equate that to 3 and figure out what the whole number is. This number 5 is probably the trickiest one so far. And it's not tricky as in the maths is hard, it's tricky to get your head around what they want you to do. If this was a proper time test, I would suggest, okay, let's leave that one for now. We'll come back to it if we've got time at the end. And if we haven't got time at the end to look at it, we just have a guess. You are required to know certain things like angles on a straight line and angles inside a triangle in order to work out some. And some of them are designed to make you make sure you understand maths words. So this question talks about digits. You've got to know they're the individual numbers. The sum of the two digits, you've got to know that means adding up. So let's look at what this question says. Results calculation is almost the same as this, except that two of the digits are in a different order. What is the sum of these two digits? Okay, so how I would suggest you do this is if you just begin to multiply. I'm not expecting to multiply the whole thing. You're going to find that, okay, my 8 times 9 is 72, so I've got a 2 in the right hand position, and that's instantly wrong. It should be a 2, and it's actually a 1. So that means that the 2 and the 1 must be in the wrong position. Because if only two digits are wrong, and from working out the first one, we know that the 1's in the wrong position, and we got a 2 there, they just must be swapped over. So 2 and 1 makes 3. So some are a lot easier than it initially looks. You don't need to work it out all the way, just part of the way. Okay, I'll skip out a few because there's the same sort of thing. So I'll just bring up some different techniques if I see them. Right, so certain things you need to know, such as prime numbers. You got to know that prime numbers have two factors, 1 and themselves. 1 is not a prime number, 2 is a prime number, and that they start off 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, etc., etc. And when it comes to questions like this, I'd suggest, well, let's just write a few out. And if you write out a list of a few of them, the smallest prime number, just write a list of prime numbers, have a look at the list, and you can spot the answer. So that sort of thing helps. Just trying to do it in your head, not always going to work. Then, I'll talk about question 15 slightly, because divisibility rules comes up quite a lot in these sorts of tests as well. So, which of these following is divisible by all the integers from 1 to 10, inclusive? So what you might think I've got to do is I've got to multiply all these and then try dividing them by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's just too much work. Okay, what we've got to do is, if we know our divisibility rules, we've got to know that, well, let's just look for a second. If it's got to be divisible by 5, then one of these numbers must also be divisible by 5. That's the only way it can work. So straight away, you can eliminate A, D, and E. They're not possible because they're not divisible by 5. If no part of it is divisible by 5, then the whole thing's not divisible by 5. Then another way of looking at it would be, well, let's look at 7. If 7 goes into the whole number, it's got to go into part of the number. 7 doesn't go into 34, so it doesn't go into 45. It can't be this one. It does go into 56, so it's got to be option C. And I did barely any workings there. I've not seen this question before. It's just these divisibility rules really help if you understand them. It's you can't do the same thing. Like, you might look at that and think, hang on, 10 has to end in a 0, and I'm looking at these and none of these is divisible by 10. But the reason that doesn't work is because 10 is not a prime number. Okay, if you think about divisibility of prime numbers, they have to be, because they can't be split up into the two parts, into the two separate numbers. They have to be just contained within the one number. So that's how I looked at 5 and 7 and figured out it had to be C immediately. Okay, when you get to question 15, it's a big bold black line, and then this starts the harder questions, and this is where there's some potentially negative marking. Okay, so then it gets to 21, and the questions get harder again, and you start getting -2 if it's wrong. So what you've got to do is, for your work today, is all I'm expecting to see is nice and clear, number 1, A, number 2, B, number 3, A, whatever your answers are, just nice and clear. I want to see that. If you want to type it out, that's fine. If you want to write it out and take a photo of it, that's fine. I don't need to see all your workings. I just want to see your answers, because then we can start actually figuring out if this was a real test, sort of how you would have done. Okay, it's a case of all these marks turn into different awards. If you get a certain number of marks, you're going to get a bronze award. A certain number of more marks, you can get a silver, you can get a gold award, and you can qualify for different things based upon that. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how people do. Okay, so something a little bit different this week, and perhaps that'll make it more interesting. And it's definitely extremely useful for your problem solving skills. If you think about all the exercises you've been set, the straightforward questions nobody has a problem with, but when it gets to the can you explain this, can you justify that, can you find an example of where this doesn't work, that's where this problem solving skills comes in so useful. Okay, so have a go, and if you've got any queries or problems, then just ask me in the chat.